All right, so here's a quick test. How many of you guys know the 16 pins of the DLC by memory? Raise your hand. Okay. And if you don't, it's not a big deal, but I'm going to go ahead and show them to you. The reason why it's a good idea for you to understand what each pin communicates with is because if you get a car that comes in that has multiple communication protocols, you need to be able to identify what type of communication protocol am I to expect, right? And we'll get to that here in a bit. So anytime we're dealing with the DLC, I always look at 3 pins right off the bat, okay? And here's 2 of the first of the 3. Number 1 would be chassis ground. Chassis ground on the DLC would be pin 4, okay? So what is the biggest ground on the car? You guys should all be answering the car, right? That's why we have chassis ground, because it's the whole car. So if you want to verify your chassis ground, you could do it from pin 4. Okay, do a voltage drop from the battery ground to pin 4. If you have more than 200 millivolts of voltage drop, you got a ground problem. Okay, and that ground problem is going to resonate through the entire car. Why? Because your whole car is your ground. Okay, so if you're able to verify your chassis ground through the DLC, why not? Right? Okay, when I do scope classes, I always teach doing a relative compression test from the DLC. Okay, I don't know about you guys, but I'm a tech, so that means I'm lazy. So I try to look for ways of doing things the easy way, right? So I'll take a breakout box and I'll connect my lap scope on pin 16 and 4 and run a compression test. And that's how I'm going to figure out right off the bat, is this a mechanical fault? Do I need to go mechanical, fuel, or ignition? Okay, so that's just a quick example. Pin 5 of the DLC is sensor ground or signal ground. Okay, so that'd be another ground that you can actually check. One thing that I always share when I talk about the DLC is certain manufacturers will use either pin 4 or pin 5 to power on their scan tool, and some manufacturers actually jump the 2. Okay, so this is why there will be times where people will call me and say, I plug in my Autel and it works, but if I plug in my Snap-on, it won't work. Okay, so what that means is either you have pins that are too loose, you need to tighten, repin your DLC, or that one scan tool that won't power on is trying to grab ground from a pin that doesn't have ground and it's not jumping it inside of the actual connector. So that's one thing, a couple things you could look at that point. So the next communication protocol that I talk about is J1850 VPW. So if you guys ever worked on GM, non-CAN GMs, so this is probably like 05-ish, somewhere around there, or any Chryslers, they communicated over J1850 variable pulse width modulation, and that's pin 2. So anytime that you guys are working on a GM and GM says class 2 communication, where do you think class 2 on a GM is going to be? Pin 2. Okay, so whenever you're dealing with GM class 2, where are you going to go? Pin 2, right? And let me catch you guys front probing a DLC, and I'm going to smack you. You guys should be using a breakout box, right? Anytime you guys are going to the DLC, or back pin it, never front pin a DLC, okay? So after that, we have J1850 PWM, all right? So I'm one of those guys that learns to, if I want to memorize something, I associate it with something, right? So PWM, pulse width modulation, M, Motorcraft, Ford, M, right? Okay, so 1850 PWM is a protocol that's used by Ford, and that would be pin 2 and 10. Okay, so Ford, the older style Fords that are non-CAN, would all talk over pins 2 and 10. So if you guys ever get an older Ford that comes in that has a communication problem, checks pin 2 and 10 on your lap scope to see if they're actually talking, okay? The next one is ISO 9141-2. So if you guys are dealing with any Honda, Nissan, Toyota, BMW, Mercedes, you're talking over ISO 9141-2. You're going to find that on pin 7 and pin 15 of the DLC. Okay, so usually the way this communication protocol works is it sends a handshake, and I'm going to show you guys a picture of the handshake in a bit on pin 15. Once they lock communication, they shake hands and agree. Then they start exchanging information on pin 7, okay? There's another protocol called KWP 2000, right? It sounds like a rapper. So that's keyword protocol 2000. This is basically the transition from standard communication protocol to CAN, all right? And this one also communicates over pin 7 and 15. Okay, so again, if you guys are diagnosing some older communication faults, that's how you're going to be able to find them when it's KWP. From there, we went to a standard called J15765-4, also known as Controller Area Network. Okay, so if you guys have a vehicle that's CAN, okay, you would be able to test that at pin 6 and 14. Okay, that was true up to a couple years ago. Now we have things called gateway modules. Anybody know what a gateway module is? Okay. A gateway module is a way that we're able to use multiple speed communication buses on one vehicle and have them all talk to one another. Okay. So the gateway module is acting like mom, right? When you have two brothers that are arguing, mom's going to be the mediator and kind of decide what's going to happen. Okay. Your gateway module is doing the same thing. So it's taking information from your high-speed CAN, low-speed CAN, your LIN bus, your class 2 GM bus, your infotainment bus, and it's putting it all together and then sending out communication wherever it needs to go. Okay, that's what the gateway module is for. And it's also for security if you're dealing with Chrysler, right? Good old Chrysler. Okay. And then lastly, pin 16 is going to be unswitched battery power. Okay, so if you guys ever plug in a scan tool and it doesn't turn on, first thing you should do is grab your DVOM, pin 4, pin 16. What your meter should read is battery voltage. If it's not, you got a problem, right? Okay, so the 3 pins that you guys should check right off the bat for any type of DLC issue would be pin 4, 5, and 16. Okay, right off the bat. Why? Because GM loves to wire in pin 16 to their cigarette lighter. So when your customer is using a cheap charger for their iPhone, okay, and it shorts out, it's going to short back out and it's going to kill that fuse for pin 16. Okay, so you guys got to be careful with that and understand that that's unswitched power. That pin should always have source voltage. Okay, and that's it. Those are the standard pins for a DLC. 1, 3, 8, 9, 11, 12, and 13 can be used by the manufacturers in any which way they want. Okay, so the manufacturer could put whatever they want there, all right, and use it. The one thing I will tell you is our great friends from Kia Hyundai do not listen to emission standards, because there'll be times where you're going to get a CAN car from Hyundai or Kia that doesn't run off of pin 6 and 14. Okay, so if that ever happens, just go ahead and pull your wiring diagram for the communication bus or the data bus, and then you'll be able to get a good idea of where the hell they put those pins.